Voltron Legendary Defender Season 2. So this is going to be my spoiler, it's going to be spoilers in it, it's going to be spoiler free from the very beginning, and of course I'll reference when there are going to be spoilers, but this is going to be my review for the entire season. I'll be referencing different episodes and just different moments in general. It won't be like too much specific stuff. Outside of the season finale, I'll definitely be talking about my speculation since Season 3 actually isn't out yet. I did do a full season review for Season 1, which is kind of the same thing where it's like not too spoilerish in the beginning, and then after like a minute and a half, I reference that there are going to be spoilers. So you guys can check that out. I'll put a link in the description. But starting off from this first episode, really great. You know, we kick off right from where the finale of the first season is, and everyone's scattered, and obviously these would be spoilers from the very beginning of the season, but everyone's scattered, and it was incredibly well done. Like, especially the stuff with Shiro and Keith was my favorite part. And at least as far as drama. As far as comedy, like the stuff with Karan and Allura going through kind of the time loop, that was like the funniest thing I think they've done in both seasons of this show. Like, that had me laughing incredibly hard. Like, I just loved all of that. So really enjoyed that. But the emotional stuff that we got from the characters was incredibly well done. And this is where I officially start to get into spoilers, because this is something that I had to like not even remotely, you know, mention during the first season, my first season review, but I feel like it applies here, and I don't know if they're going to actually do this or if the season finale was meant to be a reference to this. But in the original Voltron, and I don't remember who it is. I heard this like a super long time ago, and because I wasn't really, like, I was never really into Voltron, it never stuck in my head. I just remember somebody actually died. Someone dies, and then Allura ends up taking over. And I don't exactly know who it is, but I did recently see a picture where it was, you know, all the paladins and Allura, but there wasn't a black paladin. So I assumed that it was supposed to be the leader who dies, and then, you know, like, as they referenced early on in the season, the red paladin ends up becoming the new leader. And I feel like they referenced that, but I don't think they're actually going to do it. And if they do, they probably won't do it for like a couple more seasons, but I feel like this was meant to be that reference, and they won't actually kill a character off, because they have Shiro disappear, but he doesn't actually die. So it's like, okay, we get to have, potentially, depending on how they start up the third season, we might actually get to have them reference the original series where Allura actually takes over for one of the paladins, and then eventually they find Shiro, and it's like, okay, he's not dead, and then he gets to come back and take over, and it's like, we kind of had that reference to the original series where someone died, and that's super tragic, but we don't have an actual death. It's just like the character disappears for a little bit, and then he comes back into it. So I feel like that's what they're doing with it, because, you know, the way that it happened, it was really mysterious. He literally vanishes, you know, in the season finale. It's like, he's gone, and it's just like, poof, that's it. There's no references to where he might be, no clues, no nothing. It's like, he just disappeared, there's no explanation, and that's all there is to it. So I feel like that's kind of the point that they were making going into the season finale, or I guess ending off the season finale. It was meant to be a reference to the fact that the leader of Voltron in the original series actually dies, and then, you know, the Red Paladin takes over. So I thought that was kind of a cool way to do it, where it's like, it's not tragic, which honestly, because that was in my head, I've been thinking about that since Season 1. I thought they were going to kill Keith in the beginning of or at the end of the first season when he was fighting the main villain, and I was like, oh crap, this might be the moment. Like, it might be him that dies, because, like I said, I didn't remember who it was. So I feel like that, you know, that was supposed to be, this was supposed to be that moment where it's like, he didn't really die, but he is gone. So we'll see Shiro come back at some point in Season 3. Maybe it'll be halfway through. Maybe it won't be until the end. And maybe when he comes back, he'll realize that the team is doing great, and Allura is, you know, doing good as the new paladin. So maybe he'll stay on the show, but he won't be a paladin anymore, something like that. So it'll be interesting to see how they decide to, you know, go about that. But I wanted to reference that because I'm like, I feel like that's why they ended the season the way that they did, as a huge reference to such a, you know, dramatic moment from the original series, which I thought was very cool. And I really appreciate the fact that he isn't officially dead, because, like I said, every single episode something was like a big battle. I was like, crap, so I think somebody's going to die. Like, I swear, every single huge fight they had, like I said, I didn't want to mention this during my Season 1 review, but every big fight they had, I was like, I think one of them might die. Whenever it was like an actual big villain, like not just, you know, the monster of the episode or whatever, but when I thought it was like a legitimate threat, or it was like they have some new super weapon, because they always have some new weapon coming after them, but there are certain weapons in here, like the tech thing. I was like, this is one of those moments where like maybe something could legitimately happen where someone gets hurt here. But it was just interesting. Like every giant fight they had, I was kind of worried that somebody might die. So great way to kind of end out the season. Of course, we have Shiro as our hero, our main leader of the heroes. He ends up disappearing, but we do have the defeat of the main villain at the same time. And somehow, we still have Hagar, who was like, not really the second in command, but she was making more decisions than like anybody else, outside of like the main villain. And she ends up surviving. We find out that she's actually Altan, so that was very interesting. We also find out that Allura has magical abilities as well, so I thought that was definitely cool. So she's alive. She tells them, like, bring the prince in. So now the prince is going to be the main villain, basically wanting revenge for the death of his, grandfather and all that stuff. So I'm kind of excited to see how they do the personality of this character when he comes into play as like the new main villain of the series. But they did some great stuff this season. I know I jumped like straight to the end, but it's the finale is like the the biggest thing to talk about, especially with the reference, possible reference, and that may not have been what they intended, but that's what I saw when Shiro disappeared. It's like, oh, I think it was a reference to one of the paladins dying from the original series. But going kind of back to the beginning, I think what they did, the stuff like I said with Keith and Shiro, was definitely my favorite moment, where it was super dramatic. Shiro is still wounded from his battle with Hagar, so he's struggling to survive against these creatures. His lion won't wake up. Keith's lion wouldn't wake up, so he was like basically running across the surface and using his jetpack the whole time. So it was a really nice episode where they're kind of talking back and forth as they get closer. Excuse me. Eventually they end up surviving the battle, and they kind of make this great reference where it's like, hey, Keith ends up coming in to save the day, and he actually uses the Black Lion. I was like, okay. Yeah, that was one of those moments I was like, I feel like this might be that reference I was looking for, where like maybe Shiro actually does die. And of course he says it. Whenever someone says it, I'm like, I think they're dying. So of course he says, like, if something ever happens to me, I want you to be the leader of Voltron. So it's like, once he said that, I'm like, oh, I'm just waiting for the finale. So like I said, I'm still happy he didn't technically die, but they reference it fairly early on, and it was just dramatic, and they did a great job with that. And that I feel like just that first episode is kind of what led to most of this season, or at least my favorite moments. I shouldn't say most of the season, but my favorite moments, without a doubt, were about Keith, where it's like he's trying to figure out who the heck he is, from believing he's human to getting that hint in the episode where they find Shiro's old friend, and it's like, okay, well, he had that blade, and Keith unwraps his, and he has the same symbol. So it's like, what the heck's going on? And he's freaking out about being part Galra, and as they go, kind of further in the episodes, where it's like Allura feels like they're being tracked because of her, and then Keith references the fact that it's probably me, just for random reasons or whatever, because he didn't want to admit it. But I love what they did with him. I think, especially of course the episode where he learns to kind of accept himself and he unlocks the blade. That was a really great freaking episode. Like, they're going in, it's like finally they figured out how to no longer be tracked. They get some new allies. They go in. Hunk unlocks a new part of his line with like the extra armor, like extra armor and stuff. So they're going through. They got some new stuff. They saved the planet of water people. And like, I think that was the second episode with Hunk and Lance. So that was a pretty funny one too. And they've gone through all these moments, and then it leads up to finally we know how they're tracking. We know how they're tracking us. Shiro has his epic moment where he officially bonds with the lion and has complete control over the Black Lion, and the villain can no longer track them or take control of it. So it's like everything seems like it's going right. They go to these people who are in the middle of like two black holes and everything, and it's like, finally, we got the moment where they reach the Blade of Amura. They get to the ultimate allies that they've been looking for this whole time, who will finally put things into place. They gather, their other allies and stuff. Everything is supposed to come together. And as soon as they get there, huge issues, because Keith had his blade on them. And of course everyone assumes he stole it, and so he goes through the training, and as he's getting in danger, his lion starts attacking the base, and they're freaking out because they might get killed because the lion's attacking. And he's going through trying to figure out who he is and getting the answers as to, who he truly is and what he truly is. But eventually he decides to give up the blade, and he realizes that, he doesn't need to get these answers because he knows who he is and he knows the family that he has. And of course, that ends up unlocking the blade. And it was just a great moment. Like, I really loved that episode. He took a bunch of beatings, but he figured it out finally. I don't know how long it would have taken me to figure that one out, but he figured it out, and he ends up surviving. And so, of course, they eventually escape, and everything kind of works together once he unlocks the blade. And yeah, they realize he is part Galra. So it's like, all right, he didn't steal it. They aren't actually our enemies. Everything is kind of squashed because, of course, we have everyone else in the ship. They're ready to start blasting because it's like, we lost communications, we don't know what's happening. The lion's starting to attack, which means that Keith must be in trouble. And Keith, that was another thing with Keith, he seems to be the one who had the biggest connection with his lion. And that was, of course, kind of what led them, or at least led Shiro to realizing how they were being tracked down, because Keith was in so much trouble that his lion took off and, went to him in Allura in outer space. So, it was just a great way to do that. And speaking of that episode, actually, that was one of the things I mentioned for the first season, where they reference stuff and they bring it backwards. Like, that was something they referenced a super long time ago, especially if you're watching it as the seasons were coming out. They had the ship where Pidge put like the super booster, and the first time they mentioned it, I was like, this could blow the whole ship up, and it worked for them. And they referenced it in this episode, and it was like, oh, that booster thing's still on there. And when Keith and Allura realized that they aren't the ones, they aren't the reason that they're all being tracked, it's like, well, we'll get back in time. We just use the booster. And of course it blows up, like Haran mentioned. And like, I swear that was like the second episode of the series. That's, once again, one of the things I love about this show, where they bring back like references from the first season. And it's just really cool. It was just a random thing, because watching them all together, I was like, oh crap, I got that reference, because I basically watched it like yesterday. So it was just little stuff like that that I really love. Same thing, I mentioned that for the whole first season they did stuff, and it just carries on into this season. But they did some great stuff with Keith that I really love. Like, all his character development this season was really great. And I mentioned in my first season review, I felt like the first season was like Shiro and Pidge, and then I think this season was Shiro and Keith. So I think next season will probably be a little bit more for Keith, just with him taking over as the new leader. And then maybe we'll get some stuff for like either Hunk or Lance. They're like kind of the normal guys who got thrown into this. They don't have the emotional crazy issues that everyone else is dealing with. Pidge lost, a father and a brother. Shiro was kidnapped with said father and brother and lost an arm. He's getting his memories back piece by piece. Now he's a ghost, so who knows where that's going to lead. Keith is part Galra. We don't know if it's his mother, his father, grandparents, or whatever, how much he's part Galra. I would assume it was his mother, just based on the vision. That's just a theory of mine, but in the vision, he's talking with his father, and it's like, oh, don't worry, your mother will be here soon. And it's a bunch of Galra ships coming in, so I'm like, I based off of what I visually saw, my theory is that his mother was the Galra. So it was just very interesting, and it really did make me wonder. I was like, okay, well, she's Galra, but she's not Altean, so why did she look the way that she did? Or maybe she was Altean, but that also kind of doesn't make sense. Because I would assume that only Galra can have those blades. So it just made me wonder, like, how did that exactly play out? It's this series where aliens exist and stuff like that. So I was like, all right, it could have just been a dude who was like, hey, she's hot, I'm hot, whatever. I don't know, but that's just my theory based on the vision that he had. It was that his mother was the one who was Galra, and maybe there's some science experiments that went on with that to make her look human, or maybe it was actually the father. But that's kind of my theory based on the visions, that it's his mother. But they did some great stuff with him. Like I said, I think it was just really well done. His kind of journey from that episode where he and Shiro are together, where they talk about him being the new leader, and then him going through these processes, him making the most grand connections to his line. And he was the one, I feel, who had, even from the first season, that was kind of the big thing with him, where it's like the whole point of the Red Lion is that it's very fiery, and it takes someone who's kind of, insanely strong-willed and somewhat irrational sometimes, and, hot-headed, to actually control this thing and, bond with it. So I feel like, they did that from the very beginning, and then they just expanded on that in this season with him connecting more with his lion from a great distance, and before that, switching lions to take control and, help Shiro out. So they certainly did a ton of focus on him, just piece by piece until that specific episode. But that was definitely some of my favorite stuff for him, and of course the whole season finale was great. Really loved the episode where they went to the mall. That was almost that was kind of like one of those filler things, but it was definitely like a filler episode, but technically it wasn't because they needed the crystals. But I love that episode. It was super funny. And when they first get there, I don't know all the references, but there were like 3 that I got, because one of them, for Keith, he was clearly wearing like Saiyan shoulder pads, like Saiyan armor. So I got that. Pidge was clearly wearing some Gurren Lagann glasses like that. I couldn't remember who Karan was. Like, I recognize the costume, I just can't think of the actual anime. But I'm pretty sure all of them were referencing a different anime. So I'm like, I know that I've seen all of these things in passing. Just some of those I've actually watched. So I knew Keith had like, you know, the Saiyan armor, and Pidge had like the Gurren Lagann glasses on. So I was like, I love that. And just that whole episode was really silly for sure. But that was just a fun episode. I actually really liked the episode with Hunk and Lance when they're underwater, in the underwater planet. That was a really good one. I really liked the way that that played out, because it's like, okay, they have this set villain in the, you know, the underwater queen and stuff, and she's taking over all of her people. And it gets kind of dark at one point when the like the maid ends up failing or whatever to keep Lance and Hunk actually safe. And the queen is just like, it's time to go to the garden or whatever. And I was like, that thing is clearly about to like melt her and eat her and stuff. And I was like, that was like super duper dark. And they don't reference it. I thought they might reference it. That probably wouldn't have been a happy ending. But they're like, yeah, we won and everything. And all I thought of when they were celebrating their victory was like, I still remember that girl just slowly floating down. And I'm like, I know she's going to die, but she's mind controlled, so she didn't, you know, really get it. And that's all I could think about. I don't know why. It was like super dark to me for some insane reason. It was just like, it's time to go to the garden and stuff. And it was just like the way they did it, and her saying like it's time to go to the garden and stuff like that. It was just weird. I was like, something about this is like eerily dark. I don't know. It wasn't like insanely dark, but to me, something about it was just so creepy the way they did that scene. It was really well done. But I like how that one played out, and they found out that the queen wasn't actually the one killing everyone. It was like this crazy thing that was like an underwater dragon, and of course that allows Lance to unlock a new ability with like his sonic attack, which I thought was very cool. So I really enjoyed that. He finds out that his line actually is faster underwater, which makes a lot of sense with the, you know, freezing abilities and stuff. It's like, that actually makes a ton of sense that his would be able to move faster underwater. So I thought that was a cool little element that they introduced there. The nature tech people, love that episode as well. That was a great episode for Pidge being the tech person who's able to bond with nature and everything. So really love that episode. Led to some really unique stuff for sure. But overall, great season. I think they really did, you know, like I love the first season. I really think the second one expanded a great deal on what the first season introduced, where, you know, you get introduced to these elements and characters, and then this one introduces the Blade of Mamura, and we get to learn a lot more about them, and we get a lot more character development, and even greater character development as far as Keith is concerned. And then we get the official defeat of the main villain at the end, which still comes with some loss, because they basically go in with the 2 guys and one of them ends up dying. Technically there are 2 losses, because Thace ends up sacrificing himself as well. So the good guys do lose some people, and then technically they lost Shiro as well, with him just up and vanishing. But definitely a great second season. Still love that first episode with them going through that time portal. Karan getting younger is just absolutely hilarious. So love that. Him getting the slipperies, just really, really funny. But in general, I'd say this was a nice upgrade to an already great first season. So I'm very excited for season 3 now. I will actually be able to review that one, as I should have done this season and the last season, with reviewing the first episode and then the whole season. But I'm really looking forward to that. As far as my theories for where we might be headed for the show, I do think that they will at least stick with this Ultra team for a couple of episodes. I don't know if, you know, it's hard to say if they're going to have Shiro gone for like a whole season. I wouldn't mind seeing that. It would be weird to see like a whole season without Shiro, because it would be, you know, such a different dynamic. And I just like, I really like all the characters in this show, but it would lend to some really great storytelling elements for Lance and Hunk, who I feel like do have the least development out of the characters, because they're like the normal guys. That's where everyone else has like some really deep issues, which we start to learn with Keith, because initially he was just the angry guy, and it's like, oh, there's even more to him as well when he gets some emotional baggage too. So, you know, they don't really have all that craziness there, but I feel like it might lend to some good story, some story elements with the 2 of them. And I would love to see them work without Shiro, and how that, you know, especially with, you know, Lance and Keith always arguing with each other, where they have their bonding moments, but of course they always still argue. So I would love to see how that would play out with Keith taking over, even if it's, temporary, and then of course Allura actually being a part of Voltron, and how that would affect her, and especially after the episode where the ship attacked them, which I can't even remember. I think that was season 1, but that was a great episode too. And if that was this one, I just really can't remember. But that was one of the moments for her where she had a great sacrifice, and I feel like that would be a good element to play into with her becoming a new paladin. So very excited to see where they go for season 3, but it's hard to say as far as what they'll do, because, like I said, I feel like the ending was solely a reference to that original series with a paladin actually dying. It's hard to say how long they'll actually keep this altered team. So I would love to see it for a full season, and then maybe they find Shiro a couple episodes into season 4. But, it's really hard to say. I would love to see it, though, especially them going up against this new, the prince and everything. Is like, alright, we can't take this person down. They eventually find Shiro, and Shiro comes back into the fold, helps them defeat the new villain, and then I assume Hagar is going to live until like the very end and be like the main villain. That's just my theory on her. But I'm excited for some answers there as well, because that was a nice little reveal. I was like, how many other Altanians are out there? So, brings up some great questions. Definitely a great finale, of course. Would love to know what you guys thought about this second season, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, least favorite parts, favorite moments, least favorite moments. Would love to know your theories going into season 3, what you guys would like to see if you are fans of like the original series, or even the 2011 version of the show. Whatever you guys want to see, I would love to know about that. And of course, I would love to know which season you guys like more. Like I said, for me personally, maybe it's because I like Keith the most in general. Even from the first season, I kind of liked him the most just because he's like the anti-hero character. I tend to like them better. Plus, he has a blade as a weapon. That's a super biased and stupid reason to like a character, but I like blades. But I feel like this season was better just because the backstory that they did for all the characters really just was deeper. And even the moments when it wasn't backstory, just Shiro and Keith together on that planet, that was a deep moment for sure. And it was like they did some really deep stuff for this season, and I really love that. So I'd have to say I like this season more than the first, which was already really great. But we'd love to know your comparisons between the two. Like I said, I also want to know your theories on where we're headed for season 3, and just what you guys liked about this season in general. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.